And now on to the business of the day. And I'd like to invite the chair of the day, John Pebbody, to come to the podium and take over today's meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, President Adrian. It's really exciting today to have two very eminent speakers. We have a double act today. We have the President and Chairman of the RACV and the CEO and Managing Director of the RACV. So firstly, Geoffrey is going to speak, Geoffrey Cosgriff. He's an independent non-executive director appointed in November 2012, has extensive business experience as an executive manager and director in information technology, transport and infrastructure companies, a former chairman of UXC Limited, Leadership Victoria, and a former director of Logica Australia and Transurban. Actively engaged in coaching and mentoring executive managers and directors of companies in a diverse range of industry sectors. Geoffrey was appointed non-executive director of IMA, that's Insurance Manufacturers Australia Limited, in July 2019, and Intellimatics Australia Proprietary Limited in April 2013, and appointed president of the AAA in 2020. And then Geoff will be followed by Neil Taylor, and Neil is Managing Director, as I said, and Chief Executive Officer of RACV Limited and its associated entities, of which there are many. Neil was appointed in March 2016 with over 25 years experience in the corporate sector, both in Australia and overseas. And Neil sits on several subsidiary company boards, including Insurance Manufacturers Australia, Home Trades Hub, Repair Hub, Jet Charge, Australian Automotive Association, and is the chairman of both Intellimatics, Home Trades Hub and Australian Motoring Services. And Neil has completed courses in both Wharton and Harvard Business School in the United States of America, and is also a very competent mountain climber, having just climbed a base camp of Mount Everest in the very recent times. But first of all, Geoff, if you'd like to come to the podium, we'll start with Geoff and then Neil will follow straight after. Thank you.
Yes, when Richard Dent invited us to come along and have a chat about what we're doing in the energy space, I was quite happy to accept. I did have to delay who was coming until I made sure Neil was safely back from Mount Everest, but I'm pleased to say he's back and we're both here. So thanks for inviting us along. I thought Neil will focus on the energy side of what we're doing, and I thought what I'd do is just give you a few minutes, just an overview of RACV. Just to help me, how many in the room are RACV club members? And how many are RACV service members? That's very good. You probably know a lot of the stuff I'm going to share with you in that case. So this is going to be a quick set of fast facts, and then if you want any more details, we can pick those up in questions and answers later. So as a mutual, everything we do is aimed at delivering a service to our members and customers. We currently have about 30,000 club members, and we have about 2.1 million service members. That gives you a little idea of the diversity of our membership. In motoring and mobility, emergency roadside assistance, many of you would know about. In the last year, we did 780,000 or just over 780,000 call-outs assisting members in Victoria. With our nationwide towing business, we did 400,000 tows during the year. That's TOWS, just in case. And with our repair business, we've set up Repair Hub around the eastern seaboard, and we do currently about 1,200 repairs a week. We're on track to do about 130,000 repairs by 2025. We set that out to sort of manage the cost base that we saw was escalating and try to make sure there's value for the members there. And finally, in the motoring and mobility area, we're a major investor in ChargeFox, which is establishing probably the largest network of high-speed charging stations throughout Australia. In the home business, where most of our investments have been over the last few years, Emergency Home Assist has launched, and during the last year we assisted members and customers with 48,000 emergencies in their home during the last year. We've also softly started building a home trade service for our members, and we've completed 1,100 jobs, and we're looking to launch that to provide further services there in the home for our members. And the other significant part of our investments in home has been RACV solar. So we're currently one of the largest installers of commercial and residential solar systems and batteries in the east coast of Australia. And we also look at building that into the total configuration we're looking at in terms of our path to cleaner energy that Neil will pick up. In leisure, that hasn't been a great business to be in the last couple of years with all the lockdowns, but we do have the City Club, which most of you have probably visited, 6 other locations around Victoria, 2 in Queensland and 1 in Tasmania, and they're back and operating. At the moment, our main restriction is just being able to resource them to capacity, so we run them at slightly below full capacity at the moment as we resource up. And we also have a large number of travel, accommodation and event discounts available to members around Australia and overseas. Fourth line of our business is insurance. In motor insurance, we have over 1 million policy holders, and in home insurance, we have over 800,000 policy holders. Being in insurance in the last couple of years probably hasn't been our favourite pastime with high perils, but just to give you an idea of the scale of impact from some of those high perils. The bushfires in 2019, just at the beginning of COVID, $1.2 billion worth of claims were processed supporting members and customers through that period. 2021, just the New South Wales, Queensland flood events, just over $1 billion worth of claims that we had to service. So that takes up a lot of resources from different layers of our organisation and our insurance partner organisation. And more recently, the Victorian floods. Really pleased to hear that Rotary is providing support in Rochester, but Rochester, Shepparton and large parts of Victoria are still struggling. We've got over 1,400 claims that we're working through, trying to support them, and that's probably not the finish of it. And finally, the other important role that RACV plays in the Victorian community is in terms of social impact. One of the things we have done is solar in the regions. We've put into 27 regional towns around Victoria. We've put solar systems and batteries to make sure that they have access to communication systems during times of crisis, which was exposed during the bushfires in Gippsland. Street, where we assist disadvantaged young adults to gain skills and opportunities in hospitality. Origin, where we partner with them to support young people with mental health issues, particularly around employment and career opportunities. Lifeline, again, is around supporting people for mental health challenges, and we've introduced jointly with them an overnight texting service for younger people to get support. And recently announced, I don't know if it's all in the public arena yet, Neil, but we can share this with Rotary, that Neil's recently announced a partnership with Yalari, which is involving using some of RACV's resources to help with supporting Indigenous education. And finally, ResiMax, which again is a partnership around providing some residential housing, education and employment pathways for families close to being independent, but just need that extra little bit of help. So I think I've done all that in 5 minutes. So there's your fast facts. Now we can get Neil to come up, and Neil's really led the way in terms of a lot of the initiatives we've put in place to our cleaner energy future. So welcome, Neil.
Yeah, if I do cough through this, it's not COVID, it's because I have just come back from the Himalayas. So that puts a little bit of stress on your body. So I think before I start, you mentioned Rochester. So you've got a Rotary function where you're going to raise money for Rochester. Yeah. Would you like some prizes for that? Okay, contact me after this. We'll give you some prizes for that, because it's an important area of geography for us. There's a lot of people in and around those areas at the moment trying to help people. So happy to help at the margins with your work on that. So this, we had my head's above the screen, isn't it? That's fantastic. I just realised that. It's good. Very unusual. It's like when I sit in a Porsche. I can't get in a Porsche. There you go. That's better. Thank you very much. For those online, I am 6'5". just in case you thought I was a dwarf standing on a very small stage. we actually play, so I thought we'd just get this video going to give you a sense of where we're at in the cleaner energy space. And this was played at our AGM last week, which Geoff was keen to have me back from the Himalayas. I was keen to move the AGM, but he won. So this is a video we played.
Today, a range of new technologies is emerging, which will see Australia transition from current sources of energy to a cleaner energy future. Through several investments we have made during the last 2 years, RACV will have the ability to help all Australians make this transition. Your home can be provided with cleaner energy from an RACV solar and battery installation. Or alternatively, you might consider the Arc Line by RACV Home Energy Trial. If your car is parked at home, then the power for your new electric vehicle could come from your home via a charger from JetCharge, a business we have invested in. Should your car break down, then an RACV roadside assist van, or in the future, a nationwide hydrogen-powered tow truck, another RACV company, will be there to help. We also plan to offer portable EV charging from our roadside assistance vehicles. Once you get going again, then you can charge up on the way via ChargeFox, Australia's biggest charging network, whom we first invested in back in 2018. After this, you'll arrive at your destination, an RACV resort, where all the electricity is cleaner energy from RACV solar and power that we buy from Snowy Hydro. After your stay at the RACV resort, your car will be 100% charged again, ready for your return trip. Our portfolio of assets will give all Australians an opportunity to be part of a cleaner energy future. Whether you're at home, out on the road, or away on holiday, you can feel confident that RACV will be with you every step of the way.
So I guess that video is a way to try and show for us where we've landed in energy, and I'll talk a little bit how we started and where we got to and what I think happens next. Sort of connects lots of our business together. Some of the assets that Geoff described, he said, well, what's the logical connection between owning a resort business and an insurance business? There isn't one that's intuitively obvious. But when you look at energy, there now is. It's a car. The car sits at home. The car will need charging from solar. It will need charging from a battery, or it will need charging from a renewables grid, and that's parked at a member's home. And that member's home needs home insurance. And we will be able to package that up where we can sell home insurance, car insurance, we can put the home charger in, we can put the solar system in, we can repair your home charger, we can maintain your solar system, we can manage that energy footprint. And then of course, when you drive the car somewhere, you will still break down on occasion. You will still need electricity rather than petrol, and you'll need to go somewhere, hopefully at an RACV resort. So where we've landed with energy, and this has happened really in the last 3 or 4 years, it's actually become a really interesting unifier for all parts of the organisation. And I think, of course, the way the world has gone, I think really accelerated this view on cleaner energy in the last 2 years, and certainly in Australia since the changing government at a federal level. I think we've landed in a very, very interesting space. And I think that 10, 20 years from now, if we've got this right, then my successor's successor will hopefully look back and go, well, RACV's biggest business might be energy. Our biggest business today is insurance. That's a $4 billion revenue business. Comes with some other downsides, as Geoff's pointed out, but that's the nature of your insurance. Part of your job is to fix things when they go wrong. But with the transition we're seeing in energy, there's no reason why this couldn't be RACV's biggest business 20 years from now. And I think for me, it's even more fascinating on a personal level because first 13 years of my career, from a graduate after university till I was in my early 30s, I was working for BP. So I worked all over the world in a traditional oil company. So I worked in the Middle East, I worked in the US, spent time in Australia working for BP, spent time in Europe, spent time in Japan. So BP gave me this fantastic sort of training ground. And I think everything that I am today in a sort of career sense is sort of somewhat influenced by those 12 or 13 years in BP. And so for me, this is a little bit back to the future of where I started my career, but in a very different format. And when you actually look at the history of humanity, I would actually argue that the history of humanity from the day that somebody created fire has been energy, and it has been carbon. So everything in this room, everything you're wearing, everything you're sitting on, the food that has been cooked here in some way will have some carbon component to it, either in its manufacture or in its transportation. So this move to a cleaner energy future is going to, in my opinion, be the single biggest economic, political, and social transition, arguably in human history, and certainly in my lifetime and the lifetime of my daughter, who's 12 years old, right? This is going to be her life for all of her life as she sees this transition unfold. It is going to be very hard. It's going to be complicated. It's the right thing to do, but it is going to be very patchy. And I think in Australia, if you think about it, we've actually in Australia got used to having quite cheap energy in a relative sense. You know, fuel used to be less than $1. Remember those days? You pay your electricity bill, you didn't like your electricity provider, but it was seen as affordable. No one was really worried about grid and brownouts. And that's now all changed. And nothing is going to stop this transition happen. But you are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars, and you're looking at 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and we're all going to make mistakes along the way. It's not going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do. For us as an organization, if I talk through some of the investments that we've made and why we started this, I think it's quite an interesting story around strategy and how you do strategy. So as Geoff knows, my general view on strategy is you have a theme and you back the thematic. And we started to back this thematic around home about 5 years ago, because the history of the organization is around the car. 5 or 6 years ago, none of us in the room would own a car, according to Google, according to Tesla. It was all going to be autonomous, and we'd all be picked up in these cars, and car ownership would die. That was an existential threat, if you believe that, to a company like RACV, that back then was making most of its income from the car. So we took the view, whether or not we agreed on that, cars are parked at homes, cars are parked in apartments, cars are parked in offices. So you make the mental switch and go, okay, how do we service these things in the future around homes and apartments and where you live and where you go to work? And then you make the mental switch and go, well, if we're there repairing a car with an electrician, why can't we repair a house with an electrician? And then you make the mental switch and go, well, if we're doing lots of electricians, what about solar? So how we started with energy was out of this thematic. And it came from a guy called Alan Jocelyn, who runs people and culture and health and safety for us now. Back then he was running procurement. And Alan and I had one of these casual conversations you used to have around offices going, what do you reckon? And Alan said, well, I said, well, Alan, what do you reckon about solar on some of our resorts? And he goes, yeah, all right, I'll go away and look at that. And he came back with a proposal that we should go to tender for one of our resorts to see if we could make solar work on one of our resorts from an economic point of view. And back then the economics weren't good because it was more expensive in a relative sense versus the power price you were saving, because power was a lot cheaper 4 or 5 years ago than it is today. Today the economic case is very, very easy for any business or any consumer. If you put solar in, you'll save money versus your power bill over time. And so Alan decided we'd do it at Inverloch. Those of you who stayed to RACV Inverloch, he went to tender and he had some guys on the roof to look at the roof structure as they're building the tender. And a guy drove in with a Tesla called Andy McCarthy, who was the owner of Gippsland Solar, and gave them his business card and said, looks like you want to install solar. Here's my business card. I'm the biggest supplier in Gippsland. So he went through the process, won the tender, and then one night over dinner, Andy said, I'm getting all these private equity firms wanting to buy my business, and I really don't want to sell my business because I love my business. And I've gone, do you want us to buy it there? And we ran a process and we bought his business. And he's been fantastic. And since we bought his business, we bought another 4 solar businesses. And that's the sort of a thematic strategy rather than some of the stuff, you know, everyone sort of linear goes A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D to E. It doesn't a lot of the time. And that's been great for us. And then that business gave us a reason to start to invest in other businesses. So we were approached by ChargeFox, who hadn't got any money 5 years ago. No one was interested in on-road charging in Australia. And they came to us and said, look, would we be interested in supporting their next round of investment? And we did. And that's proved to be a really good decision because now they're the biggest charging network in Australia. And the price we bought that for, you could probably sell for 5 to 10 times what we paid for that 4 or 5 years ago. That's how quickly this has moved. No one was interested in EVs 6 years ago in a material way. No one was interested in on-road charging. And if you read the newspapers every day, there's something on electricity, there's something on charging, and there's something on EVs. So we've got those positions. And then we bought another business called Jet Charge that does home charging, because if your car's going to be parked at home, you need a home charger. So for us, you put all those assets together, as the video says, we think we have a really interesting way to help people participate in what's going to be a really messy and challenging transition around the availability of energy and the price of energy for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Another deal we've done, which is referred to partly in the video around tow trucks. We bought over a year ago Australia's biggest towing business called Nationwide Towing. We did that for 2 reasons. One, they provide a lot of the underlying services for our roadside business, which is a core asset for us, but also the name gives it away. They're a nationwide business. They're a national business. So that now gives us a big national logistics footprint. And to move solar panels from ports and batteries from ports, you need a logistics business. So that will lower our cost of logistics on our solar business as we expand that around the country. Nationwide obviously uses a lot of diesel because it's a towing company. And so we've done a deal with a US company called Hyzon, who are a manufacturer of hydrogen fuel cells. And we are currently, will be in February, at our our call center is out in Noble Park. Our roadside operations center is out in Noble Park. Nationwide's there now. There's about 1,500 people work out at that footprint. And we're basically building a multi-story car park so the staff can have somewhere to park. And then we're building a manufacturing facility for hydrogen tow trucks and hydrogen buses and hydrogen vehicles. And we will be the first customer in Australia to trial hydrogen tow trucks across our organisation. That is where we've gone in the last 3 or 4 years. It's happened very quickly. We've been surprised by the momentum, I guess, we've been able to create. And it is all started from a thematic of the home, and it all started from a man giving us his business card on a resort in Inverloch. That's where we are.
Thank you, Neil. So thank you to both Geoff and Neil for a very interesting presentation. We hear this word disruptor a lot in the business world, and we hear about disruption, and you can either be disrupted or you can actually find your way to be the disruptor, and that sounds to me a little like RAC. We're not going to be disrupted in our business. Having worked in the insurance industry all of my career, you know, I've heard the stories too that we won't own cars and all those sorts of things. But again, disruption's there, and so the question I always asked of insurers when I'm, you know, the smart aleck who used to be working in the industry who stands up and speaks to them now is, well, who's responsible for the insurance of an EV? Is it going to be a motor vehicle policy, or is it going to be a liability policy, or one of these automated vehicles where driverless vehicles? Who's going to be responsible there? Because there's lots of interesting questions out of this. But I was really impressed with what you said about the way in which you're actually involved in all of these different aspects, which is a lot more than what I thought as a member of RACV that RACV was actually doing. So we have some time for some questions. Peter Davis is there, and Peter has the microphone. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand.
We have David online who'd like to ask a question first up.
David Cram.
If you could go, David, that'd be great.
I will just thank you. And I do apologize in advance because I wrote this question down 3 days ago, knowing RACV would be presenting. I'd like to congratulate you, but this question is not related, but I will ask it anyway. Can you hear me?
Yes, David, speak up.
How is it possible to suggest a lobby action item to the RACV? Whom should one email?
A what? Who's the organizer of this? Who's our contact?
Who is the
Just
person?
email Richard, he could pass it on to the right person.
I'll email Richard Dent. Thank you.
RACV is essentially a service organization, and I think people are the key to your success. I'm aware that there's been somewhat of a high attrition rate at the RACV club with a consequent drop in service levels. How would you cope with this mass resignation that's post-COVID? Thank you.
Yeah, I won't necessarily accept all the premise of the question. So, the City Club, unfortunately, doesn't have nearly the same demand as it did pre-COVID. It just doesn't. And that's partly because conference and events haven't yet come back. And it's also because members aren't using it enough. So unfortunately, a lot of staff were let go during COVID or chose to move on where they had other opportunities. So the hospitality industry has significant labour shortages wherever. So the industry is running at about a 50% attrition rate nationally in anything to do with hospitality. We're running at about 25%. So we're running less than industry. The challenge is we need demand to come back to hire more people to give more stability to the system because the demand is all over the shop. If you go to some of our other resorts, RACV Cape Shank, which we're going to on the weekend, I believe, Inverloch, they're also challenged by not having enough people and too much demand. The City Club is challenged by not having enough demand, and therefore it's very hard for us to staff it, which means we can't run and open as many of the facilities we used to. If you go to somewhere like Noosa and Royal Pines, they're full all the time. The team can staff them as often as they like, and therefore we don't have the same manning issues. So it's a combination of all of these things. Every resort, every facility is different, but the most challenged industry in Australia for labour is hospitality, because everyone who used to work in it have realised it's not as stable as they used to think it was, and they're now taking other opportunities if they're available. We need migration to come back. We need more kids to be interested in hospitality. The hospitality industry, because of all the lockdowns, particularly in Victoria, has a job to sell itself as a good, sustainable and consistent career. People are running away from it because of what they've seen in the last 2 years, particularly in Victoria. So if you're having some service issues, I apologise for that. We will get better, but it is a very challenging environment.
Thank you, Neil.
Hello.
As a fellow BP person, I can now understand the focus on energy and the alternative energy. So my question for you is, congratulations on all the work you're doing, particularly those charging points. When I watch the ads for new battery operated cars, they all seem to have different adapters. Is there a standardization in adapters? Because it seems to me a bit of a problem that's going to raise itself.
Yeah, the world is successfully creating different ways of rail gauges back to the 18th and 18th century. For those of you who now travel out of the world again, which I'm doing again, it's the charger issue. You have your iPhone, your Apple, Samsung, and a plug-in somewhere else. It is quite frustrating. And it's driven by the car manufacturers and how they're actually doing this. There is no international standard for us. So you're actually reaching a point now when cars are being sold, they're being sold with effectively an adapter, so that the adapter needs to go to the car charger so that this thing will actually work at every charger. And you've also got some operators like Tesla who are, when people talk about electric cars in Australia and they're going, oh, we're now selling 70,000, I think we sold 70,000 electric cars last year in Australia. And there's about 1 million cars sold in Australia. There's about 14 million cars on the road. So the best projection I've seen is that you might get to 1 million EVs within 5 years, but you'll still have 13 million other cars out there. So again, this transition is going to take time. And you've got some manufacturers in Australia, there is basically only one electric car of scale. It's Tesla. They are 80% of the sales market. And Tesla are like Apple. They want to run a closed system. So Tesla want you to use their app. You want them to buy their battery. They want you to use their car chargers and not open access to anybody else. So you've got the major player currently in Australia wanting to have a closed access system. So they're not playing nice with other vehicle manufacturers around the plug capability. And to give you a sense of scale of where Tesla think they're going, Tesla did I think about 1.5 million cars last year. They've just opened a new factory in Germany, which I visited, and a new factory in China, which of course you can't get to, even if you wanted to. And they need to open a factory every 6 months for the next 10 years, and they want to double their capacity every year for the next 10 years, so they're selling 20 million EVs by 2030. That's what Tesla are trying to bring off. The scale of this is extraordinary.
Well, thank you to Geoff and to Neil for a very interesting talk today, and certainly this whole topic of EVs and so on is it's interesting, and you've put it into perspective for us of the challenges that are there in that marketplace. So we certainly want to thank you for the very insightful talk you've given to us today and for being our guest. We like to honour our guest speakers at Melbourne Rotary with a special gift, which I'll get in just a moment. We have in that gift pack 2023 convention socks, and I'm being assured that these are extra big ones, just so they fit, because both of you are tall gentlemen. There's a 100-year coin, which was a celebration of our centenary in 2021, and then also a book about Melbourne Rotary. So thank you. Could you please put your hands together again? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we want to thank all of our visitors and all of our guests for attending today. For those of you who come and sit in the seats and see how smoothly this runs, we actually had a fairly busy day for Joe yesterday, because I think just about, other than President Adrian, the rest of us were appointed in the last 24 hours to our particular roles today. But thank you, Peter, for stepping in to the role of MC, and to Robert Fisher for the reflection as well. We want to also thank our setup team, our lunch setup team and reception teams for their efforts. And if you can stay back for a few minutes afterwards to assist with the packing up, that would be very much appreciated. Of course, this is something that Ted Garland has been heavily involved with, and certainly we miss not having him here at the moment at this sad time. So also a reminder, next week we have our final evening meeting. Yes, you're right, it's not the second Tuesday of the month, it's the first Wednesday, sorry, of the month. But that'll be our final evening meeting at the Lyceum Club. Our guest speaker will be Tim Connellan, AM, founder of CEO and CEO of TLC for Kids. And we will hear from our member Tim on the establishment of this charity for the welfare of sick children and the initiatives they undertake. So we hope that many of you will be able to join us for this final meeting of the year, our final evening meeting. And then, of course, on the 14th is our Christmas celebration. That'll be a lunchtime meeting here, and always a great occasion. And we thank David again for the work he does for that meeting.